Yes, welcome back, and we continue to discuss this conflict of interest. And yeah, two wrongs don't make a right. So the fact that there was a conflict of interest in 2017 probably doesn't make it right when there is one now. And let's see how this discussion plays out. I see a lot of reactions from various people on this matter. Wade Jennings Gitai says, yes, it was and should have been condemned at that time. It must be remembered that we can support a conflict of interest law and at the same time remind the president that he engaged in conflict of interest in 2017.
Mohamed Wali names one public servant who owns 4 companies, which he also regulates, and that he says that no legislation is required to correct what he calls an obvious conflict of interest situation by a presidential appointee.
Wow, okay. Interesting. And talking about conflict of interest, there's another conflict that was playing out at Nyayo National Stadium. Did you see Chief Justice David Maraga there? I didn't. I was there. I didn't see him. His seat was also empty, and we had pictures of that seat. Yes, it was empty. And not so long ago, the Chief Justice talked about humiliation and mistreatment at Mama Ngina Drive in Mombasa during the Mashujaa Day celebrations. And he said he will only go when he is recognized, when he is respected, and when the judiciary will stop being mistreated. And this is what he had to say.
Today, the CJ was allowed to walk to the dais through a sidewalk. And the MC did not acknowledge his arrival, but he did it to other people. I have decided that unless I'm treated with the dignity due to my office, I will choose which of those state functions I will attend.
Yes, I spotted the President of the Court of Appeal, Justice William Oko. That is the farthest it went in terms of the senior judiciary members. The Chief Justice wasn't there, the Deputy wasn't there, and there seems to be a problem, Linus.
There is a big problem, and it points at the issue of constitutionalism in this country. There was that famous press conference where we just seen that clip by the Chief Justice David Maraga. He made it clear that he's not going to play second fiddle again. What Chief Justice Maraga is very aware of is the principle of the Constitution of Kenya 2010, which is a strict principle of the separation of powers, the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature. And by staying away, that's actually a demonstration of that power of the separation of power, because this is unprecedented for a Chief Justice to sit out of a presidential function. That also tells you how far we've come in terms of the Constitution that supports this kind of liberties. You know, in 1971, now 1971 keeps coming up tonight. There was a Ndegwa Commission, and also in neighboring Uganda, Idi Amin, who was the president of Uganda, got rid of his Chief Justice. In physical terms, Joe, that's what it means.
Yes, it was very
in the 80s as well in this country, we've never killed a Chief Justice, but I know it would not have been possible for a Chief Justice to actually stay away from a presidential function. This is the spirit of the 2010 Constitution, and it is a very strong statement by David Maraga that if you interfere with our work, we will not cooperate with you. And I think the earlier all arms of government read this principle of separation of powers, the better, the less the embarrassment, especially for things like this, where the Chief Justice stays away from a presidential function.
I think, Francis, it is unfortunate that it has come to this. I mean, this was obviously Maraga's revisit moment. He said, well, I was treated this way in Mombasa, and so I will decide which ones to attend, which ones not to attend. And I think he decided this was not one of the ceremonies he wanted to attend. And I mean, it is unfortunate because this is easily one of the more prominent ones. I mean, marking independence and becoming a republic and all that sort of thing, that is a big deal for any country. Any national day around the world is a big deal, and you would want a ceremony of this sort to be inclusive, to have everybody, where everybody feels respected. But I think the point that Maraga is making with this statement is that issue that he's been talking about. I know the last press conference had this feeling around it like that Nusumkate moment, because he talked about Mercedes-Benz and all that sort of thing. But the point that was lost there was, hey, we are just as independent an arm of government as any of the two. And I think that is something that is alien to how we've run our politics and our governance generally in Kenya, because as Linus was saying, in those days it was unthinkable that a Chief Justice would behave in any manner likely to suggest that they are defiant, or that somehow they are beginning to chart a path of their own and that sort of thing. But the 2010 Constitution made it absolutely clear that all three arms of government are co-equal. That is how they are seen. The logic of how the Constitution is made is that each of these arms of government are independent in their own right. There's none that is superior than the other, but there's a sense in which they need to work together. In that diversity, in that independence, there's a way that their paths have to keep crossing, which is why there has to be that cordial relationship, because the judiciary at some point or another would need, there are people who are sworn in by the Chief Justice. The President himself has to be sworn in by the Chief Justice, for instance. So there is a sense in which these things happen. The JSC, as in a sense, answers to Parliament at some point, and so the paths have to keep crossing. And so this kind of acrimonious relationship between the three arms of government can only be bad for the country. So for me, I would love to see a situation where there is mutual respect, that each arm of government does not attempt to lord it over any other, and that the three arms of government actually operate as the Constitution expected, that they are independent, but somehow their paths keep crossing, and they have this harmonious, respectful relationship amongst themselves.
Yeah. Joe Francis, you remember when Maraga was making his statement alone on the steps of the Supreme Court, he actually alluded to something akin to being harassed by certain people within government. I think the boycott is a statement to those who actually did that, whether it was made to walk through a sidewalk. There's this problem, persistent problem of bad manners in the administration of politics, where certain people are treated a certain way, just as a way of either humiliating them or showing them that they are no longer part of the center. I mean, we've seen the deputy president sometime landing in places where he will not find a county commander or a county police commander himself to receive him, which is a statement, you know, basically to belittle or humiliate a particular officer. I think I would love to see a situation where the country moves to a more mature way of doing things. David Maraga is CJ until the end of his term. There is no other way of removing him unless you go through the process that is laid out. Same to the to the judges that are serving in the court. If you disagree with them, there is a process that you can follow. Stop denying them budgets or downgrading their vehicles and things like that, because it's cheap and old way of doing things. It really worked in the single party era when everybody did not have anywhere to turn to. These people like Maraga have the Constitution to turn to that protects their positions. The judges have that protection from the Constitution as well. So it's just going to be a long, drawn-out thing, and which brings me to one point that is very mysterious. Why hasn't President Uhuru Kenyatta named or appointed the 41 judges that the judiciary is still waiting for? We saw an explanation by head of public service some time back that there is that affidavit. And the affidavit, yes, that there is no money, which is actually a very, very lame excuse. This is part of this environment that is poisoning the relations between the executive and the judiciary. And in the end of it all, it's pointless because there is no winner, especially when you have a constitution that is as robust as the Constitution of Kenya 2010. It's just going to be a prolonged, frustrating wait for Kenyans, and there'll be no winner between the judiciary and the executive.
But there will be a loser, and that loser is the ordinary citizen
people,
who is looking for justice in the corridors of justice.
That is true, Francis, but may I also add that, in my view, it is symptomatic of people refusing to accept the new constitutional reality that we have. I mean, we have people who have hangovers from days past of how things used to happen. And I think this is, and it's not just with regard to the judiciary and all that, the things you see even in government, even how some government officers still treat people in offices and that sort of thing. People have refused to wake up to the fact that it's a different dispensation. When we passed that constitution, some people have said, and I think they were right, that many people didn't know what they were passing. The fact of the matter is that the new constitution that we passed, I don't even know if it's new anymore. We are trying to change,
years old,
we're trying to change it.
Do you think it should be the next discussion after conflict of interest?
You know, but that is what I think we're suffering from, where we have a constitution, but we don't want to live by it. What the late Professor Okoth Ogendo talked about constitutions without constitutionalism.
Yeah.
We have the constitution, it says one thing, but we refuse to do this and just do the other, almost as if to say we don't care what the constitution says.
Yeah, and there's also the functional part of judicial independence. Then there's also the financial independence, because at the end of the day, the budget for the judiciary will still be determined to a great extent by the executive and by parliament. And I mean, Jubilee still has the numbers in the House. So every so often you will see judiciary being harassed by denying it the necessary budget, attempting to punish it, yes, but ultimately the person who bears the brunt is the ordinary citizen, and whose money these three arms of government are quarreling about. Because an ordinary taxpayer, an ordinary citizen, expects that through their taxes, there will be more judges, more magistrates, more courtrooms, and quicker dispensation of justice, such that you don't have cases, lagging on in courts for 10 years, 5 years, 7 years. Yet these are taxpayers. But at the same time, there's that supremacy contest that is totally unwarranted, Linus.